Hello everyone and welcome back. So we're doing VEDA because this is a tradition, I guess, and something that really motivates me to do videos, because otherwise I just fall into my bit of self-doubt and despair, and yeah, I just don't do shit. But because we're here, I want to talk about Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Basically because this has recently come up again in my life. I know this has been quite popular on BookTube in the past. Most people have read this collection of poetry before, but it has just recently come out in Portuguese in Brazil. I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. And also because I believe Rupi is in the process of writing her new collection. So let's just talk about this. I know Rupi Kaur has, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing her last name right. I hope I am. Probably not. I know that she's actually quite popular on the interwebs. But like, I have really strong issues with this book that I feel most people don't. Most of my friends, especially girl friends, really love this. They connect with this, it resonates with them, and I think this is all true, but I also think there are really bad parts to this that no one really talks about. So yeah, let's get started. First thing I would like to say is that I do not believe many of the poems here work as one-offs, as like isolated poems. I'm just gonna put this down because I'm getting tired. Most of her isolated poems read kind of like self-help, and that's not necessarily bad, but it's not like good self-help. It's really cheesy. I feel like some of her poetry, if your crazy religious aunt send this to you on one of those video slide presentations with flowers blooming and angels and a choir singing, you just think this is cheesy AF because it's someone kind of hipster and cool on the internet saying it. You kind of go like, whoo, this is so artsy. Just like, no. Like, I was music, but you had your ears cut off. Or you were tempting beautiful, but stung when I got close. I recently did a bunch of fortune cookies as a birthday gift for my best friend, and all of the fortunes came from this book, and they read like fortunes. They didn't read like poetry. They read like fortune cookies, fortunes. Because I think this is the really big drawback of this book, is that isolated without the context of the entire oeuvre, this feels cheesy and empty and weak and kind of self-helpy, but not in a good way. But then I know I'm gonna be like, people are gonna hate me for saying that, because people really passionate about this book because it is a good entry into poetry, and I do think that this is really easy, really accessible, and it is a good entry into poetry if you're really not into poetry. I just don't think the poems, most of them, like, of course there are a few, especially like the bigger ones, the more elaborate ones, that do feel a little bit better, but as a whole I don't think they work as standalone poems, you know. I don't really remember the quotes. However, I still gave this book 3.5 stars. Why? Well, because I think it works beautifully as a collection. I don't necessarily like the poetry in this, I don't like the verses, but I do feel like as a whole it is very personal. It's kind of like poetry written memoir. It's kind of a stream of consciousness a little bit. So through this very open, very vulnerable even stream of consciousness, you begin to understand the journey of this character that is Rupi, and you begin to understand the layers of love and heartbreak and terrible things that have happened, but also sometimes beautiful things that have happened to her. So I think when you read this as a whole, and I do recommend reading this like in one sitting or like in 1 or 2 sittings, reading this like as a whole chunk of things instead of like read a poem a day or something, because then you really feel the resonance and you see how much courage it took to expose such a big and tender part of yourself. This is, I think, why most people resonate with this, because it's a simple, easy language that they can understand and that speaks the truth about some of their heartache, you know, it speaks the truth about their vulnerable, tender bits, and I think this is quite beautiful. I just don't think there's too much to each poem separately, but I think the idea of the book as a whole works. A lot of people really like the drawings, and I think some of the drawings are really worth your time because they are like poetry themselves. Like this one, "We were all born so beautiful, the greatest tragedy is being convinced we are not." I think the poem, it's really cheesy, but the drawing of the really simple 2-line drawing of a pregnant woman enhances the poem. It makes the poem more beautiful, and I think this is when the illustrations work the best. Otherwise they just seem like doodles, like someone that can kind of draw and made them on a diary and they're just there. I guess like as poems themselves, very few of the illustrations work, but then again, if you see them as doodles written on someone's personal journal, then you kind of understand it a little bit better, because then this is the journal and the doodles are just as stream of consciousness as the poems. So I think it depends a lot on what's your point of view about this book as a whole. If you take it as a stream of consciousness, journal, very personal type thing, then it all makes sense. But then if you start to analyze each thing separately, it all falls apart. I'm really curious to see her new poetry, however. I hope she escapes from these like 2-3 liner things. They're just really cheesy for me, even as I was reading this as a whole. Like the way they leave tell us everything. Those parts are really bad, but then again she can do beautiful like one-liners. "I'm losing parts of you like I lose eyelashes, unknowingly and everywhere." That line I find extremely beautiful, so I think there's really something to be said about this. And I obviously adore the fact that it is so personal, so vulnerable, and also so relatable and easy to read, and it just flows. I just wish that the poems could work better alone, like separate from the whole, because I think a good poetry collection needs to be both. It needs to be good as a whole and also work as individual poems. But still, I'm gonna read more things from Rupi. I think the fact that she writes some more approachable poetry is really great, and I crave that. I crave approachable, oh my god, language in poetry. So yeah, kudos for her. 3.5 stars. Good as a whole, but not that great. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll see you guys soon. Bye!